Camera shakes slightly as flashing red and blue police lights reflect off a picket fence. A furious woman points toward a backyard full of people laughing and eating. Cut to an officer reading a large banner that says, "Garden for Heroes, Fundraiser for Wounded Veterans." A stunned silence, then gasps. The officer turns to the woman and calmly says, "Ma'am, this is an authorized charity event. Clapperboard Part 1 script. No headings, pure narrative, 500 characters." It started with a simple idea, one that came from a place of gratitude and love for the people who serve this country. My husband James had just returned from volunteering at the local Veterans Center. He came home quiet that day, carrying more than just brochures. That night over dinner, he looked up and said, "What if we hosted something small, like a backyard fundraiser for the vets?" Within a day, that something small had grown. Word spread fast. Local businesses offered snacks, decorations, and foldable chairs. The high school choir volunteered to perform. Even the local bakery agreed to donate a full sheet cake with a red, white, and blue frosting banner, "Garden for Heroes." We sent emails to the entire HOA a week before, attaching our event permit and the charity approval form. Everything was by the book, no corners cut. We even posted a physical flyer on the community board. But there was one neighbor we knew would be a problem before the first RSVP arrived. Her name was Dolores, but most people called her Karen behind her back. You know the type. The woman who measures grass blades and sends HOA warnings about non-regulation flower colors. Her house sat diagonally across from ours, and it seemed like she never left that front window. The morning after the flyer went up, James caught her staring out with binoculars. He waved. She closed the curtain. The week leading up to the party was pure excitement. Veterans we'd never met emailed to say they were coming. One even offered to share his story. Teens from the neighborhood practiced patriotic songs in someone's garage. Everyone wanted to help. But Karen, not a word. The night before the party, just as we finished stringing lights through the arbor, I heard her voice over the hedge. "Big event tomorrow," she called. I turned slowly. "It's a fundraiser. For veterans." A pause. Her lips curled just slightly. "I hope you have the proper permission. The rules are very clear." I smiled, polite but firm. "We do." "Fully permitted." She didn't respond, just disappeared back inside. The morning of the event felt like magic. The garden sparkled. American flags lined a walkway. Neighbors filtered in with covered dishes and lawn chairs. Laughter and country music filled the air. It wasn't rowdy. It was warm. Family. Together. Veterans sat up front, name tags pinned to their shirts, some with service hats, others just smiling quietly. The high schoolers sang, and a toddler danced between folding chairs. By 1 p.m., the donation box was already half full. There were thank you cards written by children and hand-drawn posters taped to the fence. I noticed Karen again. She stood behind her window, arms crossed, face unreadable. I watched her pick up her phone. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. And in that moment, a slow, cold dread crept up my spine. Something was coming. Something loud. And we had no idea just how far she was willing to go. The breeze that drifted through the backyard that afternoon was soft and warm, the kind that made flags ripple gently and wind chimes whisper. You could smell the barbecue from across the block. People were laughing, holding paper plates piled high with ribs, cornbread, and coleslaw. Kids chased each other around the rose bushes. One of the veterans, Mr. Reynolds, stood quietly by the koi pond, his eyes moist as he watched a young boy salute him without prompting. Everything felt right. Like this was more than just a garden party. It was healing. It was connection. It was America. And then the energy shifted. I caught the sound before anyone else did, the distant rise of sirens, cutting through the music and laughter. At first, it didn't register. We live near a highway, and sirens are common enough. But these weren't speeding past. They were slowing down. Then the unmistakable red and blue strobes flashed across the hedges. 2 patrol cars, lights spinning like some twisted carnival, rolled up in front of our house. A hush fell across the garden like a blanket dropped from the sky. People froze mid-bite, mid-conversation. One of the choir girls gasped. Even the toddlers went quiet. Out stepped 2 officers, hands on their belts, faces unreadable. And behind them, Arms folded and triumphant, stood Karen. She wasn't hiding behind curtains now. She was front and center, practically glowing with self-satisfaction, watching like she had just dropped the final piece of a chess match. James stepped forward calmly, napkin still in his hand. "Afternoon, officers. Everything okay?" The taller officer nodded, surveying the scene. "We received a call about a possible unauthorized gathering. Noise complaint. Report of potential alcohol being served without a license." The words hung in the air like a bad smell. All eyes shifted to Karen. She didn't flinch. I stepped up beside my husband, holding out the folder that had been sitting near the donation box. "We have the permits. For the gathering, for the sound, for the fundraiser. It's all pre-approved by the HOA and registered with the city as a charitable event." The officer took the folder, flipping through the pages with practiced ease. He nodded slowly. "Looks like everything's in order." Karen stepped in, her voice loud and sharp. "Are you even looking at that closely? You can't just take their word for it. This party has been disruptive. There are cars parked all over the street. It's chaos." The shorter officer glanced around the yard. "Ma'am, I see children playing, veterans seated peacefully, and a banner that clearly states this is a fundraiser. Frankly, it looks like a well-organized community event." Karen's face turned a shade redder. "You need to shut this down," she snapped. "You're supposed to enforce the rules." There was a pause. The taller officer turned back to us, handing the folder back. "Do you mind if we take a quick walk around? Just to make sure everything's in compliance." "Not at all," James replied. As the officers made their way through the garden, a few neighbors began whispering. A couple of them shook their heads at Karen. One elderly woman, Mrs. Lowenstein, stepped right up to her and said, "You're embarrassing yourself." Karen stood there, frozen, still trying to hold her ground. But the look in her eyes had changed. Just slightly. When the officers returned, the taller one approached the donation table. He pointed to the large laminated sign hanging above it. "Garden for Heroes. Fundraiser for local veterans. HOA approved." He looked at Karen. "Ma'am," he said gently but firmly, "this is a lawful, permitted event. There's no violation here." Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The air grew still. You could feel it, the turning tide. One of the choir kids raised her voice. "Should we keep singing?" James smiled, a quiet confidence returning. "Please do." The music resumed. Laughter followed. And slowly, life flowed back into the party. Karen remained planted in place for a moment longer, looking like she couldn't believe this hadn't gone the way she imagined. As the crowd moved on without her, something else moved too. Her power. It was slipping away. The music played again, but it wasn't quite the same, not yet. A strange energy lingered, like the echo of thunder after a sudden summer storm. People tried to relax, but eyes kept flicking toward the edge of the lawn where Karen now stood, arms limp at her sides, her mouth tight, her pride crumpling in slow motion. The officers didn't leave right away. They stayed for a few minutes, asking a few guests how things were going. One of them, a younger man named Officer Diaz, stopped near the veteran seating area and took off his hat. "My uncle served in Iraq," he said to a quiet older man in a wheelchair. He never really talked about it, but he would have loved something like this. The vet smiled back, lifting his cup of lemonade in a silent toast. Officer Diaz gave him a nod, then turned to us. "Honestly, I wish more neighborhoods did stuff like this. Communities kind of lost these days." "Not here, though." Karen heard that. Everyone did. She turned away abruptly and walked back to her house, the crowd parting for her in silence. Her shoes crunched on the gravel, and with each step, it felt like she was shrinking. Smaller, duller, less. As the gate clicked shut behind her, the atmosphere shifted again, lighter this time. Music swelled. Laughter returned, louder than before. Someone started up the grill again, and the smell of burgers wafted through the air like a declaration, "We're not afraid of you." Then came the most unexpected moment of all. Mr. Howard, a retired Marine who rarely spoke, asked for the microphone. He stood under the garden archway, one hand resting on a cane, the other holding a folded sheet of paper. "When I came back from overseas in '89, I didn't know how to be home," he said, voice soft but steady. "There wasn't anyone waiting at the airport. No signs, no cheers, just silence. People fell still. But today," he continued, voice cracking slightly, "today you gave us something. You didn't even realize it, maybe. But you reminded us we matter. That we're still seen. That our story still belongs somewhere. He paused and looked out at the garden full of faces. Karen might not understand that, he said gently, but I do. And so do the men and women sitting right here beside me. A wave of quiet applause began. Then it grew. Then it roared. Tears welled in my eyes. I wasn't alone. Teenagers clapped. Parents clapped. Veterans clapped. Even the officers joined in. And yet, behind it all, I noticed Karen again. She was back in her window, this time with the curtain open, watching everything. No binoculars. No phone. Just eyes. For the first time, there was no anger on her face. No smugness. Just stillness. Maybe it was reflection. Maybe it was regret. I wasn't sure. Later, as the sun began to dip lower, casting golden light across the lawn, one of the kids handed out ribbons. Red, white, and blue, printed with, "Thank you for your service." They gave one to every veteran. Then, to my surprise, the child walked right over to one of the officers and pinned a ribbon on him too. "I know you're not a soldier," she said shyly, "but you showed up today. That counts." He looked stunned, then nodded. "It does. Thank you." Karen's curtain closed again. The camera crew from a local news station arrived shortly after. Word had gotten around. One of the guests had posted a short video of the police arriving and the officer reading our charity banner. It had started spreading online like wildfire. HOA drama turns into veteran triumph was one headline I saw later that night. As the camera panned over the garden and the crowd, a reporter asked if someone would speak about what happened. I almost stepped forward, but before I could, James turned to me. "Let them tell the story," he said, gesturing to the veterans. So they did. Their words weren't perfect. Some stumbled. Some paused too long. Some cried. But it was real. And in that moment, Karen wasn't just the woman behind the curtain anymore. She was the outsider. And we, all of us, were part of something she had tried to stop. The news story aired that night at 9 p.m. sharp. It opened with drone footage of the backyard, colorful and alive, full of flags and smiling faces. Then it cut to the moment the police cars arrived, the officers walking through the crowd, followed by a close-up of the large banner that hung proudly near the arbor. Garden for Heroes, fundraiser for local veterans. The reporter's voice came in, calm and steady. What started as a noise complaint turned into a story about community, service, and the power of coming together. Our phones didn't stop buzzing for hours. People we hadn't spoken to in years reached out. Local officials commented publicly on the event. Even the mayor reposted the video, calling it a powerful moment of community pride. Donations to the charity doubled overnight. One retired general from another state even asked if he could send a letter of thanks to the veterans who attended. It was everything we hoped for, and far more than we ever expected. But behind all the joy, the story wasn't over. The next morning, a letter slid under our front door. No stamp, no envelope. Just a folded sheet of paper. It was from Karen. The handwriting was stiff, neat, too precise, like it had been rewritten several times. I didn't understand. I thought it was another backyard disturbance. I didn't know what it really was. I was wrong. That was all. No apology. No signature. No request for forgiveness. Just that short, unfinished admission. James read it twice and slid it back onto the table. "It's something," he said. "Not everything, but something." I left the paper alone. Later that day, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Not to punish us, but to address what had happened. Apparently, Karen had filed multiple complaints against residents in the past, many of them small and dismissed without follow-up. But this time, she brought the police to a legal, peaceful charity event, one that the board had already approved. Half the neighborhood showed up to the meeting. For once, the room wasn't cold and sterile. It was charged, alive. People were speaking not out of frustration, but out of a new kind of unity. "I've lived here 20 years, one woman said, "and I've never seen this place come together like it did yesterday. We shouldn't have to be afraid to gather," another neighbor added. "Especially when it's for a cause like that." Karen didn't attend. But her absence said more than any words could. By vote, the board decided to revise the HOA rules, not to tighten them, but but to loosen them. Events that supported local charities and community outreach would now have streamlined approval. Residents could apply without fear of being blocked by a single complaint. And just like that, Karen's control began to crack. It didn't happen in one big public moment. It happened in whispers, in choices, in shifting loyalties. Neighbors who once avoided each other started sharing morning walks. Front lawns began to show more color, more signs of life. Even the community bulletin board changed. Instead of warnings and restrictions, it now held handwritten notes. Need help with groceries? Looking for volunteers for park cleanup. Free piano lessons for veterans' families. A small transformation had begun. The kind that couldn't be forced. Only sparked. One afternoon, I saw Karen walking to her mailbox. For a second, we made eye contact. Her face was calm, not hard, but distant. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. Just turned and went back inside. I wondered if she regretted what she'd done, or if she simply didn't understand how deeply the moment had changed everything, and how far she now stood from the center of the community she once tried to control. But I didn't dwell on it, because something more important was coming next. A city council member had reached out. They wanted to talk about replicating our event in other neighborhoods, making it part of a citywide initiative to support veterans through community-led fundraisers. And they wanted us to lead the first one. It wouldn't be just a backyard anymore. It would be a movement. The city's plan moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, flyers went out, a website launched, and volunteers signed up from every corner of town. What started as a small backyard fundraiser was now called Honor Routes, a community-wide initiative to support veterans through local events, gardens, and public gatherings. James and I were asked to speak at the kickoff ceremony downtown. Neither of us had ever spoken in front of a crowd that big before, but we said yes. We spent nights rehearsing, writing, and rewriting every line until a message was clear. This wasn't about us. It was about connection, about healing, about giving people the chance to feel like they still mattered. The morning of the event, the city plaza buzzed with energy. Rows of folding chairs filled the lawn. Booths offered crafts, food, even small handmade flags that schoolchildren had decorated. The choir kids performed again, now wearing red shirts with honor roots printed across the front. And the veterans, dozens of them, stood proud, wearing old uniforms, hats with patches, medals pinned carefully to their chests. I scanned the crowd, and then I saw her. Karen. She wasn't in the front. She wasn't near the stage, but she was there. No sunglasses, no sour expression. Just quiet, standing beneath a tree, watching. James saw her too. He didn't say anything, just gave my hand a soft squeeze before walking up to the podium. When he began to speak, the crowd fell silent. I used to believe our quiet backyard was enough, he said. A peaceful life, a few flowers, grill, maybe the occasional block party. But I didn't understand what community really meant. Not until a moment of tension forced us all to come together and then stay together. I followed him and spoke next. My voice shook a little at first, but then it steadied. We didn't plan to challenge anything. We just wanted to show appreciation to people who've given so much. But in doing that, in simply gathering, we uncovered something even bigger. Our voices aren't meant to stay inside our homes. They're meant to blend, to rise, to lift others. The applause rolled over us like a wave. After the ceremony, people came up to talk. Some asked how to host their own fundraiser. Others just wanted to thank us. But Karen didn't come forward. Not yet. It was later that evening, when we'd returned home and were pulling signs off the fence, that I heard footsteps. I turned and saw her standing on the sidewalk, holding a small white envelope. Her expression was tired, not defeated, but softer than I'd ever seen. She extended the envelope. I donated, she said, her voice quiet. I don't need a thank you. I just wanted you to know. I took the envelope. Inside was a check, and beneath it, a note, just one line written in a shaky hand. I was wrong to see you as noise. You were the signal. She didn't wait for a reply. She just turned and walked back to her house, slowly. That night, James and I sat outside as the last of the light faded. The garden was still. Lanterns flickered. The koi moved quietly in the pond. Do you think she meant it? I asked. James didn't answer right away. Maybe, he said. But either way, the neighborhood changed. That's what matters. In the months that followed, the neighborhood newsletter filled with new names. Karen stopped writing letters to the HOA. Someone said she started planting flowers again. Small ones. Daisies. We didn't try to change her. We didn't ask for anything. But we left the gate open. And somehow that was enough. Because real change doesn't come from shouting louder. It comes from standing together, quietly and firmly, until even the loudest critics realize they're the ones standing alone. And in that stillness, something new begins to grow.